Thank you, Dinesh. I'm really very sorry that Prashant is not here. Fortunately, some personal family tragedy had to take him away. Prashant first approached me to curate and display the work of a French photographer, Jérôme Lenoir, whose work is outside, these abstract works. And then he said, will I speak at the Artist Forum? So I said yes, because it will give me an opportunity to speak for the first time about my relationship to photography. As is already sort of some kind of ground has been laid or mentioned about the relationship of art to photography. And in in that sense, it opened the door for me to make my presentation. As you can see from the title, I don't take photographs, but I'm working with photographs. Well, Umrao Singh Shergill has already been mentioned. My sister and I have announced a grant for photography, which was mentioned on the opening day. My grandfather placed this Voigtlander camera on my lap, and I want you to notice the way that the finger is placed on the shutter, and this finger placed on the shutter will again be referred to later on as I proceed. I sort of start with some key words since the photographer's image is not so ever present but in various ways. So I thought that this might provide a kind of frame for the kinds of thinking that goes behind some of the way that I approach photography, which has very many different formats and positions, and this gives you a slight indication, I hope, that how we will proceed. Well, as the first says, painting photographs in reference to paintings. Now there's a long tradition of that, and I'm just going to show a few of the works that from which I made the paintings, and how the portrait gets transformed in a pictorial space. So these are two working woman and her daughter who I made this work, which is actually has a reference to, if you see, there's a police chowki of the famous, what was called the famous Mathura rape case, and in a kind of Garcian manner, there's a sort of cinematic multiple angles which you could have a crane shot moving through this landscape. This is my close dear friend Bhupen Khakkar, who I did this portrait of, and Howard Hodgkin, the famous English painter, came and saw his painting and said, I'd like to meet Bhupen, and I introduced him. And so again, the artist in the studio has a long tradition, both in painting as well as photographs being made from them. The kind of blue that floats in this painting, I think that where color photography comes in, there would be many examples of how color also becomes more than a backdrop, and as painters allow that possibility to take place. Can you read this quotation of Homi Bhabha, or do you want me to read it out? Should I read it out? You can read it? No, the people on the side? Is it all right? Yeah, then say, because I planned that you read it while I'm speaking a few things. I have a house in the mountains in Kasoli, and that view below is the plains where Chandigarh is. And in a sense, this man, kind of pre-industrial labor, proposes in some sense a kind of utopian vision of the future in my painting, and that kind of landscape transforms a documentary image. Here, and you will see many more pictures, photographs from the Umrao Singh Shergill archive, and I constructed this painting where there is again a reference to a cinematic mise en scène in this. And will you read this or shall I read it out? Well, just to keep on speaking, and while you read it, that in painting this family, it's a large painting, 8 foot by 6 foot, and I wanted the center to be a void so that the characters, the 4 characters of the Shergill family, which you see here, move in a kind of, I mean, the eye moves in an empty space, and I think that Kumar Shani has captured this very beautifully. Kumar Shani wanted, in fact, to make a film, and when I said documentary, he said no, a feature film. Very unfortunately, that feature film never got realized, but he did very much engage not only with this painting but with me over many decades. And so this relationship between painting and then photography and the moving image will inform the work, as you will see as we move through. Again, this reference the word archive, and the moving the archive into this zone of travel photographs was a decade in the 80s where, as you've already seen, the word place for people was mentioned, where a group of painters, some from Bombay and Baroda, engaged very much with the word and the concept place for people, with a sense of location in our country. But I had an urge, and I always seemed to want to shift gear, and in between I came across these exquisite book of travel photographs, and of course of the very remarkable work of the Scottish photographer John Thompson, who photographed not only the poor and the working class in China, but also went back to England and photographed the English working class. In 1982, I'll give a small anecdote. There was this exhibition of contemporary Indian art in the Royal Academy in London, and I had these 2 paintings that you saw earlier on, Godot and People Come and Go, and I approached Victor Bergen. I got his number, and he was a critic. I said, would you come and see the show? So he said, are there any photographs in the show? So I said, no, there are no photographs, but I use photographs to make paintings. So in a very gruff manner, he said, that's not what I mean. I said, are there any photographs in the show? And I said, no, and he banged the phone down. Well, it took me a whole decade, in a sense, to answer him. And I think I made a very radical move. Sorry. Oh, sorry, something has slipped out of it. Anyway, my apologies. The image of the stone column, which I made, and it's very unfortunate that it has disappeared. But these things seem to happen unless it comes later on. No. Well, I'll have to describe it to you. I'll go back. I created a kind of, I thought that I was connecting to photographs and photographers, and this is 1992, and I thought that I read a comment in Roland Barthes about that it's 130 years since the beginning of photography, and there are no monuments to photography. And so I thought I'll make a stone column, and I was interested in the relationship between the fragility of the photograph, and when you use the word monument, I planned a stone column, and my sculptor friend, when I said be about 3 feet high, he said, no, why don't you make it 6 feet high? So it's really sorry, the image is not here, but I hope my description will do. So I made a 6 foot high column, and then I got these quotations of Roland Barthes, and sorry, and if I can quickly remember some of the photographers who I approached. One was Dayanita Singh, the other was Ram Rahman, the other was Ketaki Sheth, Satish Sharma, and 1 or 2 others. And I asked for photographs, small 6 by 8 size photographs, and in this circular stone column, half of it I made of perspex, and I stuck the photograph on the inner side of the perspex and had a mirror. So you actually did not see the photograph, but you had the text outside. And these are the texts. There were about 8 photographs on this 6-foot high column, and these texts of Roland Barthes were outside. So if you wanted to see the photograph, you had to go slightly askew and see them. And on two of them, on two of photographs, I stuck onto the mirror. One was Ram Rahman's. So just to read the first few lines, and I said, remember that photograph of me with my grandfather, and I just read half of it. For me, the photographer's organ is not his eye, which terrifies me, but his finger, what is linked to the trigger of the lens, to the metallic shifting of the plates when the camera still has such things. I love these mechanical sounds in an almost voluptuous way, as if in the photograph they were the very things. And I think that this aspect of things and materiality informs a lot of the work which you will see. And the second part of it, which I will just read the latter portion, you can see it. But if photography seems closer to the theatre, it is by way of a singular intermediary, and perhaps I'm the only one who sees it, by way of death. And death is another theme or subject that keeps recurring in my work. So Barthes, in a sense, and my kind of intuitive way of foregrounding text and sophisticated text as in relationship to an object. And the other key word which was there, which was sculpture, and already this column was a piece of sculpture which again will keep recurring. The Shergill Archive, an installation with archival photographs and objects. This was a move I made where I had already done an installation, but this became, that was a public installation which is called Memorial, and I will show that later on. But I was invited to show in Budapest, and I had already used, as you can see, photographs of the family, but converted into a painting. And I felt a little self-conscious to take out this, move into this archive and show these photographs as if it would be a form of self-indulgence. And so taking it to Budapest, which is where Amrita Shergill and my mother were born, it allowed me a kind of distance to then intervene and take out these works and make structures. The boxes allowed a fabrication, a structure, which then could be containers to receive this archival material. Now all this archival material is photocopy and not real. It is in fact, whether you use the word fake or a copy, and in fact, as has been theorized by Boris Groys, that the copy itself then becomes the work of art. So each of, as you saw earlier on, I have the 4 family members in the large painting, the Shergill family, and here again they appear in the form of boxes. And so you have mother, and there's a photograph of her taken very early on by Umrao Singh when they just met, and is in the top as a young woman. And later on you see a small photograph, and there's a gun, and there's a gun on the table in the painting as well that she shot herself. The other is home. They were in many homes, and he photographed all of them. The family album has photographs from the album, which I fixed in plastic sheets, sealed them, but the seal always let the water through. So whenever I exhibit this work, water is placed in that container, and you find slowly the photographs deteriorating. Well, we all know how photographs gradually deteriorate over time. And the other one is sisters, where the sisters are close. That's Amrita and Indira, and that the crack in the perspex shows a certain tension and disjunction. Have you read the quotation? It's a very beautiful quotation by Walter Benjamin. They said, again, 4 black boxes for the family. These are autochromes taken by Umrao Singh, and there are about 20 of them. And all my research, and I've asked, in India, barely 3 or 4 autochromes have emerged. These were taken in the 1920s, now early 20s. And autochromes, you might know or be interested to know that the invention of them was by the famous, or the Lumiere brothers, famous for the invention of photography, of the cinema. And Peter Wallen, when he saw this, he said, "Do you know that the Lumiere brothers thought that making these color photographs was a greater scientific achievement than the moving image?" The enlargements, what you see here, are inside these black boxes, and on top are etched the names of the family. So in a sense, again, this metaphor and presence of death informs a lot of these works. I then used the photographs of Umrao Singh, enlarged them of the same size as you can see, and made them as a strip, suggesting a narrative from the young age of both Umrao Singh as well as of Amrita. And Amrita died when she was 28, and Umrao Singh lived till he was 84. And this sequence, in fact, Roland Barthes said that photography doesn't deal with narrative, and he was not at all interested in the cinema. But Peter Wallen disagrees with him and says photographs can propose narratives, and of course he was a film critic. And so my impulse, both of telling stories of narrative, which was there as part of my painting period. This little inset is a bit of history where Umrao Singh met the famous Ghadar party leader Hardyal and was involved with some revolutionary thing. But I won't go into that aspect of him, it's just an insert. Then these, as I said, these photographs already are suggesting a narrative, and coming into the age of the digital, I returned to the family album and then used the photographs to manipulate them to tell a lie, to tell then a new story. And this work is the most complex of the retake of Amritas, as you can see that there is all the 4 characters of the Shergill family are there, and again I appear in the mirror on my grandfather's lap, and in a sense you could say that I'm the one who's caught in the mirror taking the shot. So there's a double take on my grandfather making these photographs, and then my composing them to tell and weave a kind of complex story of their sense of identity. In the painting also, each one in their own worlds in a kind of narcissistic way are there, and the mirror also, each one looks at them and they are involved in their own worlds. That is my mother framed in that in the mirror where I am seated on my grandfather's lap. Already there was suggested in the earlier series, which you might not, because I moved through fast, that the whole family moved to Paris when Amrita wanted to study painting, and in a sense the house became a kind of set for Umrao Singh to take photographs of himself as well as a daughter. He took the first photograph in 1890, and till about 1948 he was taking self-portraits. So there are well over 100 self-portraits that he took, and there's a whole range of images. Here, this picture is, he's not posing as a yogi, but he was very interested in his body and in fasting, and he documented these with very minute notes. And of course, I use them in a playful manner in The Lovers. That portrait is of a painter called Boris Tashlitsky, who was a communist painter, colleague of hers, and I kind of play a round sort of circle. Of course, initially they could be straight photographs, but when you examine them, the provocation and the positioning clearly indicates that whatever freedom this bourgeois family allowed for their children, there are certain things which I think I am crossing some line or border. The aspect of death and melancholy pervades the father certainly, and he titled this manuscript of Patanjali, My Misery and My Manuscript. And the beautiful book that Devika Daulat Singh, is she here, produced. Sorry, you'd have to do the introduction and ask me questions when I finished. That's the title of the book. So this aspect of melancholy also pervades the work of Amrita Shergill through much of her paintings, although another aspect of hers was as if she led a very flamboyant life. There is a whole aspect of memory, of thinking, as this title of this work at the bottom is, remembering the past, looking to the future. And so the digital wand, as I call it, allows me to mix different periods and position them so that the aspect of their own self engrossed worlds, they are able to then connect. And in the work called Ghost, both Indira and Amrita have got married and they have left, and this is the room, in fact, where you see Marie Antoinette, that's her wonderful name, Umrao Singh's wife, shot herself, and she's got a black cat, whatever that means. Of course, again, posing in front of paintings is a feature that is very common, and every artist likes to pose in front of their paintings, and photographers will take you in front of a painting and pose you and try to make a connection between the painted image and the artist. And here also you will see how very different moods are explored in these juxtapositions, from a deeply melancholic one in Malaise, as well as to a very erotic one with a nude of her cousin, and then of course self-portrait as Tahitian. And in this Young Girls Composed, she just won the gold medal, and in fact then makes her father both as the photographer, but in fact you can see that she has actually composed the whole work and tells dad, now okay, press that trigger and here's the photograph. So the two women, which is one is Indira and another is a friend, have been posed, and I bring her in looking out to come back to India after her European sojourn. Amrita met Nehru in Lahore, and there was a certain attraction which is known and has been written about. And before his going for the Quit India movement, he said, I want to go to Gorakhpur and give this speech. Now he knew that she was living there in Gorakhpur with her uncle's family, and he says, as is written here, that he went to meet her, and you can read what he said. And a little detail is that after he gave this speech, he was arrested and sent to Dehradun jail. And in the Lahore Times, I think, when Amrita died, there was a notice, and the editor put next to it Nehru's photograph saying he has been released from Dehradun jail. So this is now 6th of December 1941. I move to, we've been seeing mostly a relationship between Amrita and her father, but music played a very central part in their life, and more between the mother, who was a pianist and a singer. she was in fact in correspondence with Puccini, and Indira went to study music. So I play you a 2-minute transformation of the still photographs from. Can we have this sound louder? So you can see on the left screen is mostly the mother, and on the right screen is Indira with her sister. It's a full 10-minute video. I'm showing you a clip of 2 minutes. The left screen is the birth of Amrita. There's a jump cut. We come to the contemporary world, the world of garbage and the street in a way, and this very provocative statement by Roland Barthes, which in some senses connects, in some manner of speaking, to the kind of work that engages me. These are photographs I took at a Sunday market, which has now been closed down by Jagmohan, just in front of the Red Fort. And these photographs I have never exhibited, except placed in a kind of file. And basically the shot, as you'll see, is a still life where only the hand or the foot, this is the buyer, and there's the seller is at the edge of the frame, and a few rather let's say poetic things, a Barbie doll, and then the way that the other objects around it suggest a kind of very different tenor and even in fact violence. The aspect of this which you will see is that it's very difficult to identify from which country these photographs are taken, and except that the feet are brown, so they could be brown from many parts of the world, and almost all the items are completely without any national identity or character. This work for me is like one of the very poignant like an image which, with my ironic title, The Great Indian Bazaar, as you can see, this man is sitting and selling 5 circles, 2 holes, and these, as Roger Ballon would say, now look at that little circle, or look at that dot. I don't have his dramatic way of speaking, but I won't give you a little lecture on how to look, but I just thought, let me point out 5 circles. The work actually was displayed. There I took, as is mentioned, about 300 photographs, and completely unedited, I made roughly about 1,000 in these beautiful red frames, and in the gallery they were displayed, and depending where it was, 100 rupees, and I remember in Bangalore where I showed them, and they were signed at the back, and maybe 10 euros when it was shown in Vienna. So the idea that the viewer comes and picks up and rummages through these and has them, and some people do say they still have them. So the idea of displacing the photograph to another form of display interested me. So here in this you'll see I used tin boxes and as backlight photographs, and this column that you see is about 2 meters high, and if you touch it, it sways. Each frame has a photograph. So it's like when you, in the old days, when you went and the shopkeeper pushed that a receipt through a piece of metal. I had the same idea, and it's very simple. If you're allowed to screw 4 screws into the floor, then this stands up because you don't see that, and it does sway, and it's quite eerie. I now move from that kind of photography to a very different scale. As you can see, I created an installation of this size in my studio, and it was a wish to try to understand what this city was about. I did a show earlier on called New Delhi, Room with Bed, and one of the stalls was in reference to a waste picker organization by Bharti Chaturvedi. And from there, I then got connected to waste pickers, and then set to create this city, which is in my studio about 60 feet long and about 20 feet wide. And Prabhat, an artist who came from Baroda, helped me with his wife Minima. So it's sort of laying out the city with garbage, and in a sense this aspect of depth and perspective. It was a photographic project in a way. So as early scenes, kind of early Renaissance scenes where you want the perspective, you climbed up a hill and you got this vast depth. And so I also climb up a little high, and you see it seen from below, and then it moves into perspective. But the project has 3 aspects to it, and one is the perspectival view, or the view that is about depth, and the second is the top angle view, or the plan view if you're an architect, or an aerial view, or then in today's terminology a Google view. Now I got my friend Pavan Mehta to shoot this, and I was in fact shooting a video, so I had a crane, and he said I can shoot this with a Hasselblad square format camera, and I'll take 7 shots of the top portion, because remember it's about 20 feet in width, and 7 below, so it'll be 14. And I did show them initially with the kind of jumbled up thing, and the beam was not straight. But then once you get Adobe Photoshop to do the rest of the work to straighten things out, then so it's also as you can see, that a lot of data which I knew, which is at the end, which is on the right hand side, would not be seen from the perspectival view. And of course it's also part of a modernist strategy to flatten the image, to bring all the aspects of surface, or all the objects to the surface, to flatten it out. It also then enhances the decorative or ornamental view, and these relationships of the grade, the ornament, the flatness inform a great deal of modern painting. So in one sense, my taking these photographs and constructing them was a way to go to color, to kind of painterly aspects which were there in the retake of Amrita as part of narrative, but color got very hugely foregrounded. Now this view is a perspectival view, And you would say, yes, it is a perspectival view. Is it a correct view? Is it a false view? Is it telling a lie? And if you look carefully, it is not a correct perspective, because the same view, the same thing is shot at two levels. So you see a little football field bigger there, and you start looking closely, then everything is coming twice. So I was interested in the viewer playing with these notions of depth and perspective, whereas in the prospect work it is a clear perspectival view. So the digital allowed me to have a series which were more landscape based, like this, or this one, which is one of the most popular of the series that I've done. And you wonder why a broken kind of tin box or something in the middle gets an iconicity, and that this perspective of drink cans create a kind of whole field, a kind of magical space. But of course, it's all done in Photoshop, or I mean, a large part of it. And the second aspect of it was a kind of modernist intervention, where I used both the aerial view and the perspectival view and close-up views, and then I could work on them with Photoshop, making these frames that you saw earlier on as a glass tower, and in the structures there, making them as abstract forms. And again, when you see through it, you get the same top angle view as you saw in master plan. So these were strategies that I used, and I could play with this aspect of theater, of performance, and in a way, this is what Roland Barthes, is interested in this aspect of theatricality. And so here again, with these two theater kind of like puppets who are performing just cans, as you can see, you get then again a highly close-up view of a computer motherboard, and then below on the other side is the trash that surrounds it. I then come to my last major work, and as suggested to you, I employ, or you will find in this installation, which again is considered to be one of the earliest examples of installation art in India, 1993, and I did then with the year 2014, and you will see how 2014 appears in the work. So in fact, there are 24 photographs in this space, and each of them are in different sizes, formats, and materials, and in a sense they are embedded in this, and the viewer, as they move through, encounter the photograph with multiple points of view, with very different materials and objects, where they become completely sculptural or they stand alone as photographs. The key to the photograph is Hoshi Jal's famous iconic photograph of the Bombay riots, which I got permission from Times of India, where he worked in. And my interest in the documentary in that political moment, which was a crisis in the shaping of a modern secular India, was being frontally attacked by the demolition of the mosque. And if I can say, it is now very much current that same agenda is attempting to destroy the modern secular fabric of our country. And the other unexpected entry is the photograph which recently was not shown, of Nasreen Mohammadi's work, this remarkable abstract artist. And abstraction and minimalism, and that's very much a minimalist photograph. You would have already realized that earlier on. If you see this grid, and people are interested, I mean that the pathway is like a kind of Carl Andre, and there are different American minimalist sculptors who inform this work. So I got this image, and in some way for 6 months or so, I mean, we didn't know what to do. And when this photograph in the newspaper, Economic Times, which Sundaram Menon brought out, it was there. And in this 7 by 10-inch photograph, there are 3,600 nails that have been pierced into that photograph. So again, that reference to the grid, and the grid is both piercing the photograph, it's an act of violence, but it also becomes a protective screen, a screen to say, okay, this violence was done, but now we will form this screen. And I use different methods of protecting the dead, of just a very fragile bit of tissue paper, or again the grid comes back in a more explicit way, that the nails come out to you and they throw their shadows, as well as then a kind of poetic image, a sort of ascension of the same form of the man that's risen, but I give the man a wing, so he becomes an angel or a bird. And so playing with the same image as it keeps repeating. And somebody recently interviewed me from New York, she's from Banaras, an artist, and she said, when I saw your show, I was reminded of Indian classical music, how the same note is repeated, but when it's repeated, it isn't the same note. And I am very pleased. I'm not like Mahendra Singh, an authority on Indian classical music, but I just loved her comment. And in a way, the aspect of, again, the grid as it then reappears, and the same relationship of the material. Now here there's a performative act that takes place. Now the photograph is on the ground, and every time it's shown, that many nails and that many big nails and small nails are put in bags, and then when it's displayed, the person is asked to arrange them. So there is a kind of a ritual act that takes place every time it is shown. And the more rusty they get, somehow it brings in that famous thing called patina or aura to the image. And in the kind of ritual act where every death has different forms and metaphors, the wreath is something that is very common. And so if not just famous people, but I say that this dead man also deserves a wreath. Flowers is another thing that every person brings to put on the dead body for expression of beauty and grace. And the iron grid again uses the same metaphor. So in fact, the vitrine is a frame, but it also protects both the photograph as well as the man. And here you see them laid out. This work, Gun Carriage, you will see the date moves on a bit ahead, and this is the first time that the face of the man is seen, and it's a coffin-like form. It's split at the back, but it's got a 2-inch thick perspex shield in front, so it's like a bulletproof guard on him, so that again he will not be shot at, or if he is, he must not be killed. And using the kind of pop-up photograph, which is also an old convention for children's books, I lift up the photograph and I make a memorial for the dead man as a black and white image. It should have been part of that. Sometimes things happen which you don't plan. Okay. Can I go on? Oh, sorry, it came. Yeah, well, the aspect of sculpture, now it's there as a man, and then the Nasreen Mohammadi photograph that I showed, it's an inlay work, inlay engraving into marble, and it has more or less a quotation from a Nasreen drawing, and then you get a sense of a suprematist utopian abstraction. And so, some senses, I was very much interested in this distanciation between this documentary tragic image and constantly intervening it with different strategies of distanciation through material and abstraction. Oh. Yeah, now please notice the date, and I'll let the cat out of the bag a little later. But again, using the nails to make a geodesic dome, great Buckminster Fuller made them in more complex ways. But the idea of a poverty of means, or my connection with Arte Povera, keeps returning. And again, the photograph with this long barrack, which has ominous overtones, which which refer to tragic other earlier moments in history. Those little wheels are a quotation from Zarina Hashmi, if you know her work. And here now the photograph forms the base of a structure almost in real terms, because the real cement and real pillars, which will then refers to, in a sense, the wish to make a monument for this dead man, but these monuments do not get completed. And that now the photograph has two marble slabs, black and white, and you would find that the image is gradually not there, or it is being hidden. And here now it is completely revealed that the image has been erased. And so it interested me that showing this work, which was very iconic and memorable to people, that I didn't want to just excavate it and show it as it was, and that the aspect of both engaging in a more dynamic and forceful way with materiality, with sculpture, and then finally with digital manipulation would allow me to introduce abstraction, to introduce erasure, so that the memory of that man is what is important. The real body, has been buried. The work that I did in the first phase has been stated, and that it allows me to transform what you saw earlier on is a garbage dump into a piece of modernist architecture. And talking about modernist architecture, here is steel tar, and it has a little playful reference to the iconic work of Tatlin's Tower. And below, that whole landscape has been converted into a silhouette which could be of a factory area, and the tower pierces the photograph. So now you've got a proper three-dimensional object that becomes sculpture. And so this relationship, which I've right away indicated, and really sorry, one day I hope I can show you my stone column enclosing the gaze, the 6-foot-high sandstone work so long ago continues to engage with this relationship between the fragile nature of the photograph. And I think photographs are allowed to be manipulated. And as Barth said, they get thrown into the drawer or the waste paper basket much more than you would preserve a drawing or you preserve a graphic. But you can make a print very quickly. So the fragility and its short usage life, of course, now museum status is another matter for photography. But for allowing me to push the boundaries to work there. And here is the last image I show you of this series, where it becomes a solid piece of sculpture. A 10-foot steel beam pierces it, but it seems to be resting on this rubbish dump, which now I have completely abstracted and removed everything in front of it. And I was surprised. Many people thought, well, how much of the eye that picks up the digital cleaning up, it was just taken that this is an image. And I think that as the eye gets more and more trained, it observes that from the analog to the digital, there is a lot of changes that are taking place, and I want to foreground some of that. How much time do I have? Should I stop? Hmm? So I'll just end with, this is of the past, and very quickly I'll indicate, everybody asks you, what is your next work? So I go back to work called Black Gold, and some of you have been to the Kochi Muziris Biennale 2014 would have seen this work, which has been, no work of mine has been so appreciated and loved as this work. This is about 50 feet long and about 15 feet in width, and it's using the potsherds from the lost port town of Muziris. So they claim to be about 2,000 years old. And the terracotta, and this is a perspectival view of that. So this landscape format created this, and it was all very informally done. There's a reference to megalithic sites which you can get some sense of. And I have got thousands of these, tens and thousands of these in my studio, but I thought I'm not going to recreate it in this fashion. And so as you could see from the large work prospect or the trash work, that not many artists in India, photographers in India have used the idea of the set that's created in their studio to make photographs. And this is a convention, whether you go the Chinese way and you have studios which are, as a Japanese photographer who I met, said the size of half a football field, but there's also a whole position or procedure by artists using very minimal, very informal, small scale, creating small scale sets to make photographs. So if I can in 2 lines say that the project is that I'm now constructing, and using the word construction, using this material to create references to actual specific, not specific, but modernist architecture, which will be structures, and laying them out, moving from the aspect of something of this, which is the ruin, and the ruin building up to forms, modernist forms, which will be read as and they will be 24 inches by 30 inches in size, so they'll be quite intimate. And each one I want to get very professional photographer to light it, which is when you take something to the studio, then lighting becomes a very central part of that photography. And then to capture the extraordinary range which you get here of the tonalities of these potsherds. But the next thing that stresses me, and if I let one little cat out of the bag, which I still don't have that material, that somebody called Amit Gupta was involved in this, says that you can get a 1 millimeter line of light, which I want to embed in these works. So lines of light, which will be both inside and outside, I wish to inform this body of work. So it is both lit from on top, but it will have these linear lights which will form abstract lines and patterns through it. In some sense, the quotation of Nasreen Mohammadi comes back again, because as you know, she made a whole metaphysics out of lines, and I'm going to struggle using the ground of 2,000-year-old potsherds with this new technology of light. And as you might know, that this year is the International Year of Light. So I end on a contemporary note. Thank you.
I apologize for missing the introduction, but I guess now we'll have to make up with engaging you in a thoughtful and hopefully a provocative conversation about your relationship with photography. So
yes, that's what you're here for.
As we've just seen Vivan talk about his relationship with photography, which began on an autobiographical note back in the mid-90s, and we see it transform and move right up till Black Gold, which is 2014. So I want to reflect back in 2008 when we finally showed the Trash series. And because we have this audience here with a lot of young photographers and I guess a lot of students as well, I want to go back to that moment when we showed Trash at Photo Inc. And I don't know if you recall it, it sort of created a lot of furor, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, because there were too many artists, painters, etc., who were using photography. Whereas the photography community in itself, the photographers were feeling very insecure because you had Bharti Khed, you had Subodh Gupta, you had Pushpa Mala, people coming from a non-photographic background using photography. And you recall that debate that we had in the gallery. I thought it was going to be a very testy and a fiery one. And we had Vivan Sundaram, in a circle with all the photographers in Delhi at that time, and he handled this discussion very amiably, and it turned out to be not such a fiery debate. My question to you is that your relationship with photography has gone from both the public and the private and has become a very integral part of your practice. Was it just the beginning of the family archive that got you interested in photography, or would you have been able to sort of come to photography as you did, say, with installation art in the 80s, and then with sculpture, and more recently as your experiments with theater and fashion go? Because your relationship with photography really spans a very considerable part of your practice, unlike a lot of other painters and artists in India.
Yeah, well, as I said, the first use of photography in this very simple way was when I did that painting called Guddo. And the mother and the daughter were, working for my father. And I just recently returned from England. And somehow using the photograph as a support to make paintings. So that was before, in a sense, Umrao Singh properly came into it. But very soon, the Shergill archive painting, I just rummaged through the top layers of it and, found each of the 4 characters and, particular photograph that informed that painting. But as I was looking through the photographs of Umrao Singh, I realized, as is well known from the late 19th century, ever since the camera became lighter and lighter, that the growing middle class, upper middle class, took to the camera. And as he said, every father had a camera. And when his wife was young and beautiful and the children were growing up, and you see, actually, it's well recorded that the father is taking pictures for maybe first 8-10 years. Then the wife becomes domestic, the children grow, and he stops taking photographs. So the family album, in a sense, is possibly the largest genre starting, 150 years ago or so. So looking at Umrao Singh's photographs, I started really looking at them. And, the painter, not that the photographer's job is not to look, but the act of contemplation, of looking at a painting. I remember when I went to England and Kitai, my teacher, said, "You come here, young man from India, you're going to be swamped by so many things. Find a painting that can be your friend." And in the Courtauld, there was a landscape by Cézanne, which I kept going back to. And it became my friend as the seasons changed. So this act of looking, and it was at that time that I started meeting photographers. Ram was here. Then there was a person who was then very well known, Satish Sharma. And there was a friend of his, Amit Pasricha, Ravi Pasricha. And they were good friends, and I used to hang out with them. So I started learning, about photography. And then I asked them, and they said, "Yes, I think there's something in these photographs more than just a dad taking pictures of his family." And bit by bit, as is now known Umrao Singh. So I think that this aspect of relating to photographs comes from an interest where I've got that camera in me, but I never took to it. But obviously, some genes in me told me that, yes, photography is a medium that I can relate to, use, work upon. and I will not claim to take photographs. And the only ones that I've taken are this second-hand market. And as you can see, I'm even displacing, showing them. I put them like a bit like the Anita thing, you know, put them in files and look through them. But you see the pile of things there, or in a metal box. So that relationship of how you view them was already, I was positioning myself in that context. And I think it also relates to my moving into making works in other mediums, of introducing into my practice installation art that allows me to position photographs as I've done.
It's a 20-year-old romance with photography, and we've sort of seen it emerge from the family archive and move into your interest with the found object, the secondhand, aesthetics of secondhand goods, as well as urban waste. You've never been compelled to pick up the camera, other than that little instance you had with the Great Grand Bazaar. Have you never felt an urge to pick up the camera and go out and make photographs?
Shall I answer the question another way? People say, I used to make paintings and they were good paintings, and it's now 25 years since I painted a painting, an oil painting, and why don't I go back to oil painting? And maybe slightly jokingly, slightly self-consciously, I say painting has moved a lot, and there's some very fine painters. I'd make very bad paintings. So I would obviously be making very bad photographs. So I have to use my intelligence, my strategies, and as I said, I mean, the word, there's the word which is already mentioned in the Shergill Award, the grant, that there is the constructed photograph or the performed photograph, which is a self-conscious activity. And this aspect of the constructed photograph is what interests me. And so already, as you can see from that series of trash, which is pictorial, which is full of color, and if I can again be personal and quote, Akbar Padamsi, the great painter, came to see my show in Bombay, and he said, Vivan, my God, you're a painter. Look at the color. I'm so happy with you, because many of these artists were very unhappy that I had left painting. So I think that aspects, I mean, the retake of Amrita, also if I was part of a whole group and movement of narrative painting, then it comes back through another medium. So I think that as long as I have resources, and as I say, if you excavate from the earth and get this archaeological stuff, then I'm engaged with what I'm doing, and I hope, again, this aspect, and I asked you, which photographers make photographs from sets in India? I mean, making a set. It can be 60 feet long, or it can be, as I said, 30 inches by 24 inches, and the sets then are used as a base to make the photograph. So I'm comfortable in that zone at the moment, but I can always change.
If you look back at your career, not just with photography, but if you look back now, almost, let's say from the late 80s onwards, I mean, painting was a solitary act, but once you started moving into installations and sculptural works, collaboration has been a very important part of your practice. Yeah. And how has that played itself out? Because we don't see a lot of that being part of our photographic practice, or even, there are no intersections where photographers are collaborating with other artists and other individuals.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've attempted many collaborations, and I can state that I have failed in many of them. I mean, with whoever I'm collaborating, either I seem to take over, or they say what you're doing we don't agree with. So I have had a small and painful journey, but I haven't given up. And I can say one of my most successful collaborations was in this very space, which some of you might have seen, called 409 Ram Kinkars. So that crossover from installation art to theatre to theatre that is not on the stage, but is what's called promenade theatre or immersive theatre. One could use this extraordinary space. At that time, I think we were the last to use the Mati Ghar. Now it's an endangered building. That it was very spectacular, almost epic in its construction. And Ramani, he's gone. Where is Ramani? Oh, here he is. Well, Ramani, the great documentary filmmaker, came and has shot this, and so it will relive through his very exceptional and remarkable interpretation, and it won't be a documentary 20 minutes long. It would be, can I reveal? Well over 2 hours. That was the length of the thing, and I mean, he's shot 60 hours, but that's aside. So I think that this afterlife is something that the collaborative nature in doing projects which have that open-ended scale or platform. I can't think that, I mean, it's not impossible to think that, yes, some photographer likes my approach and wants to, and proposes something, maybe that might be easier. Then I'd like to respond.
I think for at least a very large group of the audience here, I just wanted to make one point, and this is a point where I think, at least as far as I'm concerned, or the photography community is concerned, I think we've reached a point after, I think, 20 years where we can now lay claim to Vivan Sundaram as part of our history. And the reason I bring that up is because prior to 2008, I think all experiments with photography which artists were making at that time, whether, and I've named quite a few of them, whether it was Subodh Gupta or Bharti Kher, Pushpamala, of course, has had a very consistent relationship with photography. Having said that, I think the one persistent, I would say, relationship that we've seen in the world of photography has been with you. And until you actually started exhibiting in a photography space, the idea that photography would actually ever rise to the occasion or, you know, get up the ladder, as they say, I think it only happened once Vivan Sundaram exhibited in a photography space. He did that in Bombay in Chemold, which was very easy because it was, you know, an art gallery. But I think the minute he came into a photography space, I noticed a sea change in the way people began to view art. I saw a sea change in the way people like Rubina Karode, who's sitting out here, began to view photography. So in that sense, I think, and I'd like to say this on behalf of all of us, all the photographers here and people who've been thinking and writing about photography, that if it hadn't been for you, I mean, we'd be reflecting on this 10 years hence. But I just want to say this because this is a perfect platform with so many people from the world of photography here. If it hadn't been in 2008, I don't think my journey would have been, I mean, it's been hard, but it just has been a little easier with your interventions within the photographic space.
Yeah, that's a good point to make, but if you go back to my Shergill archive, now Shergill archive, as I said, I got the confidence to do that work because I was showing it in Budapest. So, you know, what people would think and what would I be doing, just, flaunting, my famous family. And now Umrao Singh wasn't that well known, but at least my aunt. And once I had done it there, then where did I go? To the Hungarian Cultural Center, not to a gallery. And once it was shown there, there was just a huge amount of interest. And they said, my God, you got so much in your archive. Why don't you take out some more? I mean, I was playing with this thing of the real and the photocopy. And so I said, I think this is enough for this. So I think you're right. And then subsequently, even my retake of Amrita was not shown in, I mean, that's 95 to then 2001. It was shown in the Hungarian Art Center. And if I can give you a little anecdote, how did this retake of Amrita happen? There was an exhibition of Dutch and Indian artists in Amsterdam. And the title was, Bollywood is Here. And will I make some work? So I said, Bollywood is here, what do I have to do with it? And because of some connections with these photographs of Umrao Singh, I said, let me make Amrita Shergill a kind of Bollywood kind of image. Because there was already Kumar Shani couldn't make his film, so I thought, let me start constructing these as the title is, retake of Amrita, that these could be storyboard for a film. Of course, Kumar Shani would make an epic film. This is so. I think that this particular relationship of entering into the gallery, to a professional gallery like Devika's, it's something that, I mean, I'm not making any career out of in the space of photography, but I think that there has been this tension when certain shows that have been curated, say by an art curator, that they have selected almost an equal number of artists who make photographs as well as photographers. And there's been saying now, what is this? Suddenly there were no artist photographers, and now a whole lot are getting visibility. But I do believe that that thing is breaking down, and as already has been spoken by David and others, this relationship between art and photography is a very long one. And how Mahinder was talking about his educating himself from all modern painters, going back to Rousseau. So what is it that informs the photographer of the language they use? And certainly painting or other forms of installation art or video will feed into photographic practice.
I'm sure everybody would like to know, like we've heard so many before you talk about what influences them, and photographers that have shaped their mind or informed their practice. Who are the photographers who've sort of shaped your mind or influenced your practice? Because we know that writers do and painters do, but who are the photographers?
I'm terrible at remembering names. There's so many. But I mean, if you talk about a great name like Jeff Wall, I mean, because he constructs photographs and he has a huge sense of art history. He's almost known to be a professional art historian. So let me just throw out one name, and then you can remind me of others.
You've thrown out the most important name in contemporary art history. Anyways, I think we could throw this out, open this up to questions. And
I mean, you made a lot of references to Roland Barthes, and I noticed that the inventory of images that you use is very close to his. So family album pictures, portraits, news photographs. Of course, Barthes is famous for suggesting that the essence of photography has nothing to do with art at all. And in fact, as soon as he sensed the presence of an artist in a picture, he was off. It's kind of repelled him like oil and water.
Yeah.
So are you attracted to those kinds of pictures because you don't see them as having an artistry that would compete with your own? Because there's a common way of painters or sculptors using photographs which they don't perceive as inherently artistic, whether it's Gerhard Richter or Andy Warhol, or that somehow it's a kind of raw material that doesn't in itself have the kind of artistic intention that you want to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you probably wouldn't use a Jeff Wall picture in one of your sculptures.
No, because he's too perfect. I mean, he constructs his photographs with such perfection that there's, little point of entry into that. I mean, now they're classical and they're grand. Whereas I'm a bit on the Arte Povera side and picking up things here and there. and you're right, I mean, in one sense, Roland Barthes was very purist, as I mentioned. He didn't like narrative. He didn't like the cinema, according to Peter Wallen. So he stuck to that photograph and what the punctum on it was, and he responded to that. But these few quotations, I did find a resonance to them about, in fact, there's one picture which, again, of Umrao Singh shooting the night sky, where his finger is, clicked to the telescope portion of it. So there was this very sensuous aspect of the body in relationship to things and objects, and that interests me. So, as I said, there are artistic quotations, but I'd like very much to get to the matter directly and then find new sets of relationships, as I'm hoping in this work which I've sketched out, but I don't know how much it got through to you, about light as a very advanced 21st century linear, what's it called, optics, this
Optic fibers?
optic fiber, thank you. I was waiting for. So to use optic fiber and make lines through the work, through these structures that I will make as small architectural sets, and then get it lit by normal conventions. So that kind of proposition of opposites really interests me to explore, and that's the sort of ground or frame that I'm working with.
You didn't show the fashion work that you did, but
It's about photography.
it's about photography. And there's basically, when I'm looking through the history of your own work that you've presented, the photograph is a photography, or the product of photography is a kind of technical means by which you finish the work, right? It's like putting a layer of shellac on a piece of furniture or lacquer or something like that. And then there's the reverse of it, not necessarily opposite, but perhaps the reverse, where there's a photograph and you pierce it to finish the work.
Yeah.
In the last set, the memorial series
Right,
that you
right.
spoke about. In that sense, I'm very curious about that notion of the punctum that you just spoke about in relationship to the way that you use photography to punctuate an artistic statement, an artistic expression.
Punctuate or puncture? Or
Whichever.
punctum.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, just to get back to this, what you said, and I mean, David could help me answer that. I've been wondering that how many photographers are interested in this interface between this, what Bath call, or has been said, the fragile aspect of the photograph, a piece of paper which you can throw away, and actually adhere it to a sculptural object. I mean, you won't that easily stick a drawing or a graphic on it, but it somehow seems, at least that's my perception, that I'm interested to, which I've demonstrated in the memorial work, that then it acquires an object, and yet it is information through, in this case, a very specific documentary image, until later on I further erase most of it. So I think this relationship between, I mean, that punctum is a very specific thing which is to do with a photograph, as I understand it. But if I shift the thing, if I'm, doing a whole city, shooting it with these multiple perspectives, top angle perspective and digital manipulation, then I think that eye that captures the punctum, that gives you the kick, or as Roger Ballon was going on saying, look at that little hole there, look at that line there, etc. So that doesn't engage me. I want very much this aspect of materiality, and how much it would extend further into just an installation, which is just, the memorial is an installation, but it has other aspects to it. But if one just takes this attribute of the photograph and the physical object, or what I'm hoping to do now, so that what you're saying, I think, I don't know whether I answered it, but that particular point of the punctum isn't my concern.
David, did you want to add something to that?
Well, only to say that this is a hunch, but I've always thought that the relation between a photograph and its materiality, whatever its materiality, is never sovereign the way it is, let's say, in painting.
Right.
Because, essentially, if, the optical image is, it's the forming of an image by a lens, and it can be captured in any number of ways, and it can be outputted in any number of ways and at any number of scales. I mean, just to give you a very obvious parallel, a painter doesn't paint their painting and then decide how big it's going to be.
Right.
A photographer can. And so photography has a very peculiarly deferred relation to materiality. I mean, I know when you speak to lots of younger photographers, they're interested in materiality because they've grown up in a world sort of without it. But that slightly misses the point that its relation to its materiality was never as sovereign as it is in drawing or painting.
Right.
And in a way, Bart confuses the issue by sort of being so preoccupied with, the dog-eared photo and, that's all I would say.
No, just, to get back to this, would I exhibit, say, like the last work that I showed, Iron Rod, and say, there's a piece of sculpture, and send it to an exhibition of sculpture? And I think it would be easily exhibited there. I would like to believe if there's an exhibition of photographs and I send that work, would it equally be there? Or would there be something, or then somebody would say, is it a sculpture or is it a photograph? Now, is that a question that is not that material in today's extraordinary multiplicity of strategies that inform photographic practice, so that that everything is possible?
I don't know. Let's ask someone else.
Too much of freedom is not a good thing.
Thank you, Vivan. Devika has something to say.
No, I just wanted to thank you very much for this very illuminating talk, and also once again thank you for instituting the Umrao Singh Shergill Grant for Photography. Everybody sitting here, I hope everybody was here when it was announced a few days ago, but for those who were not here, please do look up www.ssaf.in. It's a grant that's been instituted by Vivan and his sister in the name of Umrao Singh Shergill for photography that privileges the staged and the constructed image, which is very much not just the kind of photography that Umrao practiced, but also, in a way, the kind of photography that has influenced and that you have practiced all these years. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for...